Hey, so it's been a little while since I've done one of these poem readings. Um, it is, I figured it's now the time to do it, to do more, because I've got tons of time now, um, as do you, probably. Or maybe you're working from home and maybe you don't have as much free time, but um, you know, I think it's important to engage with the arts and to give ourselves breaks, and to give ourselves time to feel and see the beauty that's out there. And I think that's like really important, especially right now, to remind ourselves that there is still beauty out there and that we can connect with it. So I'm going to be reading a poem that struck me as, just reminding me of that beauty that's out there. And that, yeah, I'll get into it. And then there's another poem that is kind of similar that I'm gonna read in a separate video right after this one. So this is by Gerard Hopkins, and it's called Spring. So it's very appropriate for right now. Okay. Nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeds in wheels shoot long and lovely and lush. Thrush's eggs look like little low heavens, and thrush through the echoing timber does so rinse and ring. The ear it strikes like lightnings to hear him sing. The glassy pear tree leaves and blooms, they brush the descending blue. That blue is all in a rush with richness. The racing lambs, too, have fair their fling. What is all this juice and all this joy? A strain of the earth's sweet being in the beginning, in Eden garden. Have, get, before it cloy, before it cloud, Christ, Lord, and sour with sinning. Innocent mind, and May Day in girl and boy. Most, O maid's child, thy choice and worthy the winning. So it's a short poem, but I love the imagery in it. I love the choice of words. I love the phonetics, the sound. I like how, you notice there's a lot of the sh sounds in it. There's lush and thrush's eggs and thrush through the echoing timber. And then, let's see. Oh, the glassy pear tree leaves and blooms, they brush the descending blue. That blue is all in a rush. So there's just kind of that sound over and over again, which is interesting because I think, you can kind of think of spring as often I think it's one of those seasons where things are changing, kind of like where autumn, like I think of, at least for me, I think of spring and autumn as kind of like there's a lot of like volatile change going on. So it's not as static as like winter and summer where it's kind of just like hot, in the summer, or winter it's kind of like cold. And obviously it's not as simple as that in reality. But I think, spring has all this movement happening. All these things are happening. The weather is changing. The wind is changing. Things are growing. There's just a whole shift. So I think that kind of sound is, he could have chosen that sound to be on purpose to kind of represent how there are, the winds of change and the literal winds that you will hear in the spring, and especially coming with those like spring storms that you get. So I think that was, and it's also like the sh sound is also kind of, it's a soothing sound too. And I think, this is a poem that contains some degree of memory in it, some degree of nostalgia. He's talking about how nothing is so beautiful as spring. That's the first line. He's talking about, how through the echoing timber, does so rinse and ring the ear. So that's something you're hearing, right? And then, you know, thrush's eggs look little low heavens. And so that's something you're seeing. And so, you know, he's talking about, you know, what you're getting from nature with the senses, and how, you know, you are experiencing spring in this way. But he's also, but he's talking very, you know, fondly about it, how the weeds shoot long and lovely and lush. And what is all this juice and all this joy? It's a very like fond sentiments. And I love how he describes the thrush's eggs I always want to put a like in there. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens. I just love that imagery, and I'm not sure if it kind of reminds me of like that robin's egg blue of robin's eggs. I have no idea if thrush eggs are also blue. They might also be blue, but that's what it reminds me of. It just kind of, you know, reflecting that pale blue of the sky. Or if they're not blue, they could just be kind of like a pale color that reflects like, you know, kind of a pale spring sky. And I love that wording. I love that phrase. And then he talks about, you know, he brings in, you know, mythology in the form of Christianity, and in Eden Garden, Christ, Lord, and sour with sinning, innocent mind, and Mayday, and girl and boy. A strain of the earth's sweet being in the beginning. So he's going back to Eden, and he's saying, I think he's trying to say like spring is, you know, it's calling back to Eden's perfection, in terms of like, you know, Eden is the idea of like, okay, everything was perfect there. There was no sadness, there was no pain, everything was lush and gorgeous. So I think he's kind of saying that like, you know, spring is kind of a callback to that, like we're getting a little taste of Eden. And then he's like, you know, before it cloud, Christ, Lord, and sour with sinning, innocent mind, and Mayday, and girl and boy. I'm not sure what he's referencing there exactly, but, you know, Mayday is, I think Mayday is a holiday that is traditionally very, you know, obviously it's in May, and it's very much associated with fertility and sex. So I think he's talking about, you know, before we sour things with sinning, while we have an innocent mind, before the May Day activities that come like later in the spring, things are more innocent and like just ripening, you know. And he's not even, I think, you know, he does say sour with sinning, innocent mind, so there is kind of a judgment there. But we can also interpret it as, you know, it's kind of just revving up to that fertility that is coming later in the spring and the summer, and not just fertility in terms of like human sexuality, but just in terms of the earth in general, that we're just starting on this path of fertility. So we're not in full bloom yet. We're not, you know, things aren't ripening in the fields yet. They're kind of just beginning, and they're still growing. They're still young. So everything's still kind of young, and the weather is still very much young, in the sense that it's not quite like warm yet or hot yet. And, you know, May Day is definitely more kind of like later spring, getting on into summer. So, you know, there is kind of that judgment there that you can read into it, but I think you can also just read into it as, you know, he is very much, you know, talking about how spring does have an innocence to it, you know. And I think like we can see that, like, and we can perceive that as we are going out and about ourselves. Like, it's not, you know, in most you know, northern hemisphere. Is that what it's called? Anyway, in most American towns, in most like northern European towns, like, you know, it's not gonna be that warm yet in spring. And Canada, I'm counting Canada. It's, you know, it's not gonna be that warm yet, and things are just kind of just beginning to feel really pleasurable. You know, you get those first warm breezes, those early spring flowers, you know, the crocuses, the daffodils, the forsythia, early to mid-spring. I mean, I guess it kind of depends. I don't know. For me, like for my backyard, the first flowers that always pop up are always crocuses. And it's just like this beautiful kind of sign of like, all right, spring's not too far away. But the downside is that sometimes they pop up like really, really early, and that will often happen. And you're kind of like, no, it's still February. We're just having an unseasonably warm day. But you know that like more flowers will come. So yeah, I just wanted to put this, do this poem because it reminded me that like a lot of us are missing, I feel like I'm kind of missing spring being cooped up here in my home. And like, this is just kind of a reminder that the world is still out there, nature is still out there, the flowers are still out there, the thrush's eggs are still out there, the glassy pear tree is still out there, and it'll be there when we're ready to emerge from this quarantine. It'll be there. It's waiting for us to emerge, to enjoy them again. So we can kind of just take heart in that, like, it's all going to be there. It's going to be beautiful when we can go back out and enjoy it. So hope you all enjoyed this.